primetime debate. The consolidation in the telecom sector continues. This time, two of the biggest groups in India, Inc., Bharti and Tata's, have joined hands. India's largest telecom operator, Bharti Airtel, will take over the struggling mobile services business of the Tata Group. The deal could be a win-win for both parties. Tata's can cut their losses and Airtel gets to shore up its arsenal to counter Jio's growing threat. Have we seen the last of consolidation in the sector, or is there still scope for some more? What does the deal mean for both Tata Tele and Bharti Airtel? And also another interesting question, now that we know who are the big three, how do they look poised in the fight to survival? To talk about this, I'm joined this evening by Rajan Matthews. He's Director General of the COAI, that's the Cellular Operators Association of India. Kunal Bajaj, telecom expert, is joining me in the studios this evening. And Mahesh Uppal, telecom analyst and director of consultancy firm, is also joining us on the phone line. But before we start with others, Kunal, just what do you make of the move? It was a long time coming. For the Tata Group, they wanted a home for their customers, as the management has said. But has it come just about the right time?
So I think from a timing perspective, they were basically down to the last straw. We've been seeing the management speak over the past week about the fact that there's got to be a rationalization of the Tata companies being done. Plus, we've seen the fact that, while it had fallen out of coverage, but this Airtel Tata discussion has been going on for quite some time, and everyone assumed that it was just kind of dead in the water because we'd not heard something about it for a long time. So it is probably just in time. It's something that's going to be a very big load off of Tata Group's shoulders, I think, and it's given the outcome, which is that there's really not going to be, Tata gets to hold on to its most valuable assets from the Tata Com side of it, I think is a good outcome for everybody involved.
Just a word on what it means for Bharti Airtel, because remember, the telecom sector and players like Bharti, especially Bharti Airtel, is in the middle of a big fight. Everyone's fighting for share, for survival, for numbers, etc. How much does this shore up Bharti's revenues and their spectrum and everything they need, their arsenal, basically?
So what it does is it gives them a credible continuation of the number one position, even after the Vodafone Idea merger, or close to number one. It gives them a little bit more spectrum, which is part of their strategy that we've been seeing as they've gone on consolidating small spectrum players in the past years, whether it was Union or whether it was LTE spectrum or things like that. So it makes sense for them because it's part of the strategy that's been there. And in particular, the 1800 spectrum that they're going to get out of this deal is hard to come by now. To get a consolidated 1800 spectrum available for the growth and continued growth in LTE. The CDMA spectrum is not going to be worth much because it's going to expire in a few years. We only have about 3 or 4 years left on that.
So you don't see them surrendering any of the 1800 because there is an overlap?
Yes, there is an overlap, and there's going to be some administered spectrum vis-a-vis the liberalized spectrum, so it doesn't make sense necessarily for them to pay a huge amount of money to convert that over. But where they have liberalized spectrum, which I believe is a fairly substantial amount that comes along with it, it's definitely an asset that they can add to their holdings.
All right, Rajan Matthews is also joining us in on the conversation. Very good evening to you, Mr. Matthews. Welcome to Bloomberg Quint. How do you see this, especially for Bharti Airtel? We're seeing three major players. Is that a fair assessment of the telecom industry right now? You have Vodafone Idea, you have now Bharti Airtel with the Tata Boost, and of course you have Jio. Are we seeing that consolidation phase beginning? Is there a lot more to come?
I think we are seeing the final contours of consolidation. Of course, there still is the Arcom Aircel merger that got disbanded. We will have to see how those two companies play out into the future, but our understanding is that both of those will look for some opportunity to consolidate and move on. So you're right, it is a three-market private operator consortium, if you will, or a group, and the one PSU, which is BSNL, MTNL. So I think you'll see a four-market player going forward. In terms of effective competition, at least, that's what the landscape will look like.
Tell me what it means, Mr. Matthews, for consumers at the end of the day, because the general rule of thumb is that the more competition there is, the better it is for consumers. What do you see happening here?
That has been kind of sort of that myth has gone away because academically and otherwise, markets have shown that you really don't need more than 3 to 4 robust operators to really ensure competition and give value to the consumer. You see this in the US, you see this in Europe, and you see this in mature markets, and I'm beginning to see this in India, so we ought not to be surprised. So the consumer will benefit because now you'll see much more of an ubiquitous rollout of 4G LTE. Tata customers were not getting the benefit of that, so now as they migrate onto Airtel, they get the benefit of coming up to speed in terms of the technology. The deep pockets that are required in this industry means that you're going to allow the telecom operators to continue to roll out these new technologies. We used to talk about 2G, 20 years, 3G, 4 years, and now we're talking about 5G already at the cusp. So I think this requires that deep level of investment requirements, which only mature, well-heeled operators can afford. So I think that speaks well for the customer experience going forward.
Do you agree with that, Kunal? Because one of those operators has got some sort of a boost recently with the IUC decisions, etc. And is it still a situation where one player is largely leading the direction in terms of pricing?
So obviously we're at a time in the industry where the consumers are at the maximum benefit they've ever been. Even if you just look at simple things like how much data utilization has grown, how many users there are on data, and to Rajan Matthews' point about the fact that now Tata subscribers will be able to come onto a network which is much more upgraded, much better, get access to LTE technology, all those things. But is it correct to say that only one operator is necessarily leading all of that? I don't think so. I think yes, we've had one operator which has done a massive disruption in the past 12 months. But I think the other operators have stepped up to the plate. They've delivered on their customer promises. They are upgrading their network. There's huge amounts of CapEx guidances that continue to be made, which means everybody who's in the game today is quite serious about being there and delivering the best value to the customers, plus ensuring that competition continues. I don't see this, maybe from a consolidation perspective, we're starting to near the end, but I don't see the end anywhere near in terms of what the industry is actually going to look like in the future.
All right, let's do a SWOT, and I don't know if Mr. Matthews will participate in this. I hope he will. But let's do a SWOT of the big three right now as we see them. You have Idea, Vodafone, you have now Bharti Airtel with that bit of Tata's, and of course you have Jio. Where do you see them standing?
No, so it's difficult to compare each of them, but I would say that Airtel now, especially if it's going to have access to the fiber assets of Tata, as well as the, say, additional spectrum and the customers and things like that, is very well positioned as a fully integrated operator. And that's one of the differentiators that Airtel continues to bring to the table, which is they have a media business, which is fully integrated with a wireless business, which is fully integrated with a wireline and an enterprise business. And that is going to be the strength that I think Airtel continues to maintain in front. Obviously, Jio being nimble, being new, having tremendous amounts of capital available to them, and all LTE network has the ability to continue to drive data consumption at very low prices. And that will be the advantage that they continue to maintain. We have to see what this new feature phone launch is really going to hold for the industry, but that's a huge advantage that Jio has. And then Vodafone and Idea coming together, I think, basically creates hopefully the most nimble all wireless player, where there will continue to be serious competition. Yes, they're not necessarily a very strong converged operator today, but being a pure play wireless operator, you can see in markets around the world, has serious advantages because you're able to continue to upgrade that wireless technology. You're able to offer customers a differentiated experience, be competitive. So it's an interesting place because each of these three operators now has a unique advantage, which is truly unique to each of them independently. So we'll see how that plays out.
I want to test if Mr. Matthews will weigh in on that, and you must really, Mr. Rajan, you must tell us what you think about, because you have been part of the industry for ages, and even though I know you have to wear that very impartial hat with the COAI, but as an expert, as an analyst, how do you see these three stacking up?
So clearly, I think Jio has taken the lead on the data side. There's not a question about that. Airtel is now catching up and is close and is now probably par in terms of scope and scale and footprint. So those two are kind of neck and neck because 4G is the flavor of the day and going forward. And when you look at Voda Idea, I think Their challenge is to catch up in a sense, all right, and again, get their networks into 4G compliant. They kind of probably bet a little bit more on the 3G side. The advantage of the incumbents, which is Airtel and Voda Idea, is that they have a substantial customer base, which is there for them to continue to enhance. All right, but I think the real issue going forward is what is the opportunity, because we all know that voice has gone free, data is becoming an increased commodity, and so the opportunity of each of them is to differentiate themselves in terms of value-added services. What is IoT going to mean? What is cloud computing going to mean? What is the enterprise side of the business going to mean? What is services going to mean? What is an integrated offering both to the consumer and to the enterprise? I think these are the areas that as we go forward is going to really make the difference for all three of them. And those who play well in those opportunity areas will be the ones that will dominate going forward.
All right, that was a very fair analysis coming from Mr. Matthews, and I'm glad it did. But, I think we should take this opportunity to talk a bit about the industry as a whole as well, Kunal, because when we're talking about who stands where in terms of strengths, we have to also look at the pitfalls and the challenges coming up ahead in this environment, in an industry which is, let's be honest, struggling a bit right now.
Yeah, so definitely the industry is not at all in a good position as a whole. It's not because of one thing, it's not purely because of a new entrant or because of competition. There's a number of different things, whether it comes from regulatory to taxation to spectrum pricing to when spectrum auctions potentially are going to take place, to changes in licensing policy and things like that. So I think, and this is probably said many times, but many times is still not enough, that the government as a whole needs to start thinking about this industry as a national asset to create connectivity and start driving forward truly all the goals of Digital India and all that other, all those other priorities that they have. But the point is that, yeah, the industry is consolidating because of the trouble that it's in, but just consolidation is not sufficient to take it to a point where it can get over the edge and get back into a safe zone. I think we're going to be for a while in a risky area, and we've got to see a lot more fundamental changes coming, both from the government side as well as from the industry side, that are going to make it much more stable.
So what would you say are the next steps that we need to see, even from a governmental point of view and for the industry itself?
So from a government point of view, delaying or extending the period of repayment of spectrum was definitely a helpful thing. It creates a little bit of upside. I think that's a very positive step forward. I think there's going to be a lot of debates around whether the ISU move was actually the right move to be made and whether right now is the right time to make that. There's considerations about when the next spectrum auctions are going to take place. I think there's a lot of debate around whether there is any affordability and capital available, whether with the industry or with banks supporting the industry to even fund an auction and to support that, or whether that would further create an oligopoly of sorts, where only one or two people who maybe have some affordability will then end up cornering a lot of spectrum at a low price, and really will not be sort of a level playing field where people are able to participate. Plus, we have to really think about how regulation around convergence is going to be in the future. And we can't continue to be in this space where voice is different and data is different and converged operators and that is different. We really have to think about how licensing as a whole, from a unified licensing policy, from promoting actual spectrum sharing, trading, active sharing, things like that, to create efficiencies in the industry that are available today because of where technology is reached, not just continuing to think in a more historical manner.
Mr. Matthews, your point on that question, challenges coming up ahead, because it is a good opportunity in light of this consolidation to talk about what the industry is facing and what the industry really expects the government to do, or what you see coming up ahead in terms of big challenges.
So first of all, people continue to ask why we knock on the doors of the government. When you realize that 30% of every rupee we take in goes back to the government, you can see why it's necessary for us to appeal to the government to reduce that burden on the industry. We are, in a sense, almost double taxed, if you will, because previously we had a revenue share regime which indicated that you pay as you go because you didn't pay for the spectrum up front. Now we are in the worst of both worlds, because you not only pay for the spectrum up front, but you continue to have the legacy of the previous revenue share. So this is the point we're talking about in saying, listen to the try, at least in this regard. Reduce your license fee to a nominal 2 to 3%. Reduce your SUC from the 5 on average of the industry to 1%. That puts back investment rupees in the hands of the operators and let them then go forward, because we have the statistics that we often quote, which says that 10% increase in broadband leads to 3 to 4% increase in GDP. When our country is struggling to enhance growth, I think this is a very quick way to get that fillip to the economy to make it go forward, as well as help the industry. I think this is one of the key things we have to look at in the immediate future.
Absolutely. I'm just going to end with one question to you, Kunal, and I come back to the primary point of this entire discussion. Bharti is shoring up, its arsenal for the fight. Is this going to be enough? What more do they need to do to maintain their numero uno position?
So I don't think anyone can say, is this going to be enough? I think if anyone had the answer to that, then they would probably be doing it. But it definitely is a step in the right direction. In terms of what they need to do, or what even say Vodafone or Idea need to do, or what a Jio needs to do, is basically continue to focus on the customer in terms of which direction are we going in. We need to continue as an industry to invest in networks and quality and data delivery and make sure that the quality of service doesn't suffer. It's difficult to do that when you're in such a stressed environment as we are today, and like Mr. Matthews was saying, when everything is double or triple taxed. But I think the focus needs to be, yes, shore up, consolidate, but also continue to focus on which direction the customer wants to go, and which is just better network, better quality, better speeds, better content delivery, all those things.
Absolutely. I'm going to end with that, because that really is it. At the end of the day, better experience for the customer is something that perhaps all telecom companies need to focus on, even as they keep focus on each other and how they can be more competitive with each other. Thank you so much.